Hello again, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 15th day of November 2020. Halfway through the month now, and I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. Start up there in the north where the warnings are. I've got winter storm warning there for the northwest interior, Noatak Valley, and those areas for tonight through Monday. And that's for 4 to 6 inches of snow to fall with winds gusting 30 miles per hour or so. And that'll create visibilities down to a quarter mile at times in the areas that have the blowing snow. And then there's also for tonight through tomorrow's a blizzard warning out for the western and central Arctic coast. And that's for winds gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour with several inches of new snow. And that'll cause whiteout conditions at times. And also for the north side of the Brooks, or the eastern north slope there on out to the eastern Arctic coast. That's later on, that kicks into effect. Let's see, that begins on the at noon Monday. The winter storm warnings or blizzard warnings there kick in at noon and continue until 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, so it'll be all night Monday night. And that's for anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of snow possible with winds gusting to 55 miles an hour, and that'll definitely create whiteout conditions there in the blowing snow. Now back down south, we've got for the Klondike Highway from Skagway all the way into downtown Juneau, and for Northern Admiralty Island, that's a high wind watch, and that's out for Monday night and Tuesday. And that's for winds. Northerly winds definitely going to be increasing, and they could, right now it's a watch, but I'd better go to a warning sometime tomorrow. But they're looking for winds to increase, sustained winds 30 to 40 miles an hour with gusts above 60 miles an hour out of the north and northeast there. And from there, moving on to satellite imagery, you can see kind of a disturbance there coming across the Queen Charlotte's, moving into western British Columbia. Close enough, they kept a few showers going over the southern southeast coast through the day today. Shelter Cove picking about 0.15 of an inch. Otherwise, other than that, it's generally a dry day there along the southeast coast. And wind starting to come up Lynn Canal about 40 miles an hour out of the north in gusts there. And otherwise, not too bad. North or south central Alaska, the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound down to Kodiak Island. Mostly clear skies up into the southern interior. Pick up some clouds around the Tanana Valley. Delta Junction had snow all afternoon, light snow, really light snow. And Fairbanks had light snow just about all day long, but amounts were less than half an inch in any of the reporting stations I saw. Some didn't have anything at all. And then the eastern Belgrade Sea coast, gusty winds and a little bit of light snow. But then the system, you can see quite vividly the cloud and cirrus shield there with the system coming across the Bering Strait and the Chukchi Sea there. That already kicking winds up from the south at Cape Lisburne to 54 miles an hour this afternoon. Tin City seeing southerlies at 40 miles an hour, while St. Lawrence Island anywhere from 35 to 45 miles an hour from the south. And that kind of connects into a pretty good system there southwest of, or actually south of Shemya. And the front pushing toward the central Aleutians, still back to the west. They're actually southwest of Kiska Island yet. But already south winds at 40 miles an hour at Adak with rain into the area there and warmer temperatures. Otherwise, still pretty good outflow there along the southwest coast with winds are not all that strong, but still had some gusts to about 50 miles an hour at Sand Point. That was earlier today. Already starting to trend down a little bit there as a high pressure ridge pushes in to the coastline. On the chart today, you can see the ridge right over the Pribilofs down across the eastern Aleutians, and again, gradient there over the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay area. And Barren Islands, not that strong, gusts 40 miles an hour, at least by their standards, and otherwise, there's some channeled mountain pass type winds there along the Copper River Basin and the Alaska Range. Light winds over the panhandle there with most of the clearing up in the north, dry conditions, some skiffs of snow, light snow along the Arctic coast there with those troughs coming in and the strong system pushing in toward the western Aleutians. See tonight, that moves northeastward there, west of AKwx, and so storm force winds tonight for the central Aleutians with rain heavy at times. And then the winter storm warning associated with that warm front pushing into the northwest part of the state. Could see light snow as far south, or flurries as far south as Norton's Bay. Otherwise, snow-blowing snow advancing eastward there. And high pressure holding over the eastern interior, ridging pretty strongly yet down into the southwest part of the state. And the panhandle dry and breezy in the north. For tomorrow, system pushes rain and increasing wind toward the eastern Aleutians, especially in the afternoon. High pressure over the northwest territories now, or the Yukon. And the heaviest weather up north shifts eastward to the eastern and central North Slope areas. While the Gulf of Alaska, most of the precipitation will stay off the coast, even Kodiak Island. Just a risk of a shower possibly for the southeast coast, otherwise dry. And then the outlook for Tuesday, strong high pressure right over Dawson. Dominates much of interior Alaska down to the North Gulf Coast, but notice a tight gradient there over the northern central panhandle for those increasing winds. Another front brings some rain to the central Aleutians. Lows tonight, 15 to or 20, 30 below, call it, over the eastern central interior, but notice a warm up on the western Arctic coast, upper 20s there, 30s out west, and 5 below to 15 above south central Alaska, and teens northern panhandle to near 30 in the south. Highs tomorrow, 40 southern panhandle, mid 20s in the north, staying below zero north of the Alaska range, central and eastern interior, but big warm up on the Arctic coast, barrel right near the freeze point.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to first line weather graphic for Monday morning. We've got IFR, central western Arctic coast, and down the northwest coast into the DeLong Mountains and the south side of the Brooks Range, otherwise central eastern Arctic coast, North Slope, Brooks Range into the upper Yukon Valley. In fact, looks like the entire stretch of the Yukon River, VFR, until you get right out to the coast there. And then marginal VFR, Norton Sound, most of Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island. Good VFR, southwest interior, out to the coast, into the southeast Bering Sea, Pribilof, St. Matthew Island to Unalaska Island. VFR, Alaska Peninsula, same thing. Kodiak VFR, as well as southern Alaska. And we've got some marginal VFR in areas of the western and northwestern Copper River Basin and along and north of the Alaska Range, Tanana Valley and upper Tanana Valley as well, maybe down in the northeastern Kuskokwim Valley a little bit there. Pretty good VFR for the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, stays the same. Panhandle VFR, North Gulf Coast, southern Alaska VFR, Kodiak Island. A little bit of marginal stuff there on the east and southeast side of the island, but not too bad. VFR, southeastern Bering Sea. Marginal now into the Pribilofs late in the afternoon. IFR pushing eastward with that next front and extending from Atka Island to Unmak Island and improving to the west. Patch of IFR, or marginal VFR, there just north of the central Alaska Range. IFR along and south of the western Brooks Range into the Noatak Valley and the central Arctic coast. Outlook for Tuesday morning, IFR mostly on the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast, and still that IFR zone, not quite as extensive, but hanging tough there on the south side of the western Brooks Range to along mountains, maybe into the Noatak Valley, and marginal VFR into the Kobuk and part of the Koyukuk Valley. VFR for the remainder of interior Alaska, right on down to the North Gulf Coast, Panhandle VFR, Southwest Coast VFR, and a couple of bands of IFR out over the Bering Sea, one near St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs right in the middle of it, and then on down to mostly Unalaska Island, and another batch out there over the western Aleutians. And for the afternoon, that first batch kind of swings up to the northeast there, Nunivak Island, right along the Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, and the other band right over the central Aleutians. And the next batch is slipping onto the far western edge of the chart there, west of Attu and Shemya. And we've got IFR eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and from about Oliktok westward, we've got VFR for the Arctic coast. Of course, North Slope, east side marginal, west side and central areas VFR. All interior Alaska VFR right on down into the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, northern half or so of, or 2/3 of the Panhandle. And then some IFR down toward Prince of Wales Island, in toward Metlakatla, Net, Ketchikan, and Shelter Cove. For passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR, but I'll go VFR for Adigan, split the two there, and Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. Rainy, VFR. Windy, VFR. Isabel, VFR. Mentasta, VFR. Tanita, VFR. Going into a chant. Portage, VFR. Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet there, north side of the Queen Charlotte Islands, southern Dixon entrance. Otherwise, at the surface, out along the coastline of the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula. Then up and just off the west coast there, through the Bering Strait, you can see it really push northward with those southerly winds we got going on, right up into the Chukchi Sea. 2,000 feet, though, lagging way back there over the western Aleutians. And as far as icing goes, not too bad. We got the batch here coming in of light to isolated, moderate, mostly rime icing there, pushing across the Aleutians, not reaching the Pribilofs, and just barely getting into Unalaska Island. And then some areas of elevated icing possibilities up over the northwest interior, Brooks Range northward to the Arctic coast. And the jet stream, high pressure slowly pushing eastward here. So westerly flow coming over the top turns northwest and then north to northeast, 70 knots right through the central interior. Strong 155 knot jet south of the Panhandle, and westerlies at about 60 over the central Aleutians. 9,000 feet, 50 to 65 knots with that low center pushing eastward there over the southern Bering Sea. And high pressure along the west coast, 55 knot winds into the far western Arctic coast. And 3,000 feet, we've got westerlies at 50 knots coming into the north slope there, north of the Brooks Range. Otherwise, much more lighter over the interior down the Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle, and then windier out over the Bering Sea. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop, eastern Aleutians to Adak, as well as the Brooks Range and portions of the north slope on up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and mechanical moderate chop for the North Gulf Coast and northern Panhandle areas. Otherwise, pretty smooth for the remainder of the state.
When I first started working here in the early 90s, this is where the glacier was. I mean, where we're walking right now would have been a pile of gravel that had been pushed up by the glacier, and then we would have had 100 to 200 foot high cliffs of ice right here. And as you can see, that's changed quite a bit. And if you look at that in 2 dimensions, you can sort of see the terminus used to be here, now it's back there. That gives you one measure. What that kind of 2-dimensional look doesn't show is how much mass has been lost, that the glacier has just sort of deflated. These 200-foot cliffs of ice have disappeared and pulled back to this gentle sloping glacier you see now.
When I was working in Kenai Fjords National Park, I used the topographic maps to navigate where I was, and I realized that the mapping of the glaciers was really off. The glaciers had receded a lot. There were new rivers and lakes that were establishing where the ice used to be or should have been according to the maps. And so then I did a study on this and found out that we had a 5% loss of glacier ice mass in the Kenai Fjords area between 1950 and 1985. Big change.
You know, one of the most compelling things we do, though, to document glacier change is simply take photographs. We've had repeat photography projects here at the park. They may not give you the most accurate data in terms of how much mass or real specific measurements, but what they do give you is a visual representation that can't be argued with. I mean, it really requires no interpretation.
Understanding what's happening, understanding these processes, and possibly being able to predict what's going to happen in the future is the best that we can do, and that requires science and research.
There's considerable research on climate change in Alaska. The most significant, I would say right now, is the Natural Resources Inventory and Monitoring Program, which is looking at change across a wide variety of vital signs or indicators.
Kenai Fjords National Park is actually a pretty good representation of what's going on globally with regards to glacier ice retreat. There have been studies showing that mountain glaciers are retreating all over the planet. There are probably well over 90% of the glaciers are in retreat status. There are a few that are advancing, and some are holding their terminus point. But the Kenai Fjords, the Tidewater glaciers are retreating more dramatically, but even the land-based glaciers in the terminus positions are retreating. It's pretty common for all the mountain glaciers. The big mountain glaciers in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, they're mostly in retreat too. We're really entering an interesting phase where what we call the cryosphere, the ice on the planet, is melting.
You know, in the more immediate past, it's clear that since the Pleistocene, glaciers have been retreating. So the idea that glaciers retreat is nothing, is no revelation. They've been retreating from across North America for the last 10,000 years. What appears to have changed and what has people's attention is the rate at which they're retreating. In the case of Exit Glacier, you know, we have scientists who've been looking at it. We have evidence that the glaciers left behind, where we can track that retreat for about the last 200 years. And we can say with confidence that in the last decade, that rate has increased.
Terminus mapping is a great way to map a small portion of the ice field. We come out twice a year and we use a GPS to walk the edge of the terminus and map the farthest extent of Exit Glacier. And that allows us to see what type of changes are occurring over the winter accumulation period and the summer ablation period. With that data, that can help us as we witness these changes within the ice field, we can hopefully be able to correlate that with the weather data that we have.
You know, when you look at an ice field that's 750 square miles, when you look at a glacier that towers hundreds of feet high, you get a sense of permanence. You think these things are massive, they're somehow a permanent sort of feature, and yet in a very short period of time, in a matter of a couple of decades, we've seen dramatic change in those things.
At Exit Glacier, we have a time-lapse camera set up on the glacier that allows us to take a couple photos every single day, and then to put that sequence of photos into a video where we can see changes of the glacier and the vegetation phenology throughout an entire year.
Virtually all the glaciers in Alaska are receding. Some glaciers are moving forward. That's not an indication that they're actually growing in size. It's just the rate at which they're slipping down the mountain.
In some cases, some of these glaciers are receding back up onto land, and so they're producing less ice. When you change a glacier system, you're changing habitat for marine mammals and other wildlife. And the populations of harbor seals have dropped dramatically in the fjords. In 1980, shortly after the establishment of the park, in Island Bay, we had maybe 1,500 harbor seals. Nowadays, you know, it's a few hundred.
In Arctic environments, much of the sunlight that reaches the Earth bounces back because it hits snow and reflects off into space, or ice on the ocean and reflects off into space. That's the albedo effect. When the snow thaws and instead you have rock or vegetation, or when the ice thaws and you have transparent ocean, the sunlight will convert to other wavelengths. It'll convert essentially to warmth. That does not bounce back into the atmosphere as much. So consequently, you get a warming of the ocean, you get a warming of the ground, you get a thawing of frozen soils or permafrost, you get a more rapid thawing of sea ice. So once the ice and once the snow is off of the surface, the rate of warming increases considerably.
If you're driving out to Exit Glacier, you'll actually start to see signs along the side of the road that have dates on them. Visitors sometimes are confused. They think they're elevations or something until they get up to the glacier and realize, oh, those were all date signs along the road that were telling me when the glacier was there. Another thing that's been happening in the Exit Glacier area in recent years is this flooding that comes at a time we're not used to. We're used to having maybe some flooding in the fall when we have a lot of heavy rain. This has suddenly been some flooding that's coming in the middle of the summer, usually not associated with precipitation events. It's associated with warmer weather and melting. When you walk down one of our trails that leads to Exit Glacier, there are a number of ways to get out there, but what used to be the main route is no longer really the main route because of the way the glacier has changed. So this main route to the glacier used to provide dramatic views of the glacier as you walk towards it. In fact, there was a large kiosk built at the end of this trail for people to stop and rest and enjoy the view of the glacier. Now, if they stop and rest at this kiosk, people think, why did the park put a kiosk here? Because it looks out at some shrubs. And there's no glacier within view anymore.
The way we solve big problems like this is not all at once. There's a thing called the Sokolov's wedges, and you just take a little bite of the pie, one sliver at a time. So we try to do incremental changes.
When we talk to people about our concerns about climate change, about the changes that are happening to the glacier, we also want to leave them with some idea of what we're doing to mitigate some of the effects of climate change. For example, here at the park, as we retire vehicles out of our fleet, we try to replace them with electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. We've done things like at the AKwx Nature Center, helping to sort of experiment and install a cutting-edge fuel cell, as opposed to running some traditional power source out there that relies on some sort of more greenhouse producing gas.
My main hope for the future is that people get the message that the planet is changing fairly rapidly in places, particularly places like Kenai Fjords National Park, and that it is, we think, there's good evidence it's a result of atmospheric changes, which are measured in terms of human inputs into the atmosphere.
The rapid rate at which these glaciers are changing now offers us the opportunity to talk about this place as a way of looking into the future. In a lot of parts of the country, climate change issues are a little more subtle, and we can point here and say, look how fast this is changing. This is what the future holds for perhaps a lot of us and a lot of the planet as climate continues to change.
I'm optimistic that people and nature will adapt to change, but my expectation is that change will occur. Time will tell.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis showing a little bit of growth there on the western Arctic coast and northeast or in toward Kotzebue Sound there, to a lesser extent along the northwest coast. So just a little bit, and Norton Bay pretty well filled in now, and ice there on the north or Yukon Delta coastline as well. And for the coastal water forecast, east winds 20 to 25 knots there for the southern coast of the Panhandle for tomorrow, Monday, 8 to 9 foot seas. Small craft advisories on the north coast, easterlies 25 to 30 knots. And Lynn Canal trending up on the winds starting now and continuing for the next couple of days. For tomorrow, north 30, gust 45 knots, north 20, Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, southeast 15. And for Tuesday, northerly sustained, 45 knots, higher gusts there for Lynn Canal, 9 foot seas, and 30 knot northerlies for Stevens Passage with storm force gusts to 50 knots, seas 6 feet, and small craft advisories for Clarence Strait, north 25. We've got gales all along the coast. For the south coast, they'll be out of the north at 35 knots, and the north coast, north to northeast, 40 knots, 11 to 13 foot seas. Cook Inlet, northeast winds, 15 to 20 knots tomorrow, seas 3 to 5 feet. Kamishak Bay, north 25. Small craft advisories also out for the Barren Islands, north winds 25 knots. And Prince William Sound, a little gusty and brisk, northeast 20 knots sustained, gust to 30 knots, seas 3 feet. And for the North Gulf Coast, northeasterlies, 15 to 20 knots and 5 foot seas. Tuesday, Cook Inlet, northerlies 10 to 20 knots. And for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots, 6 to 8 foot seas. Small craft advisories there for the eastern North Gulf Coast with out of the north 25 knots with 5 foot seas. Prince William Sound, north 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Kodiak Island on the east side, north 20, but Chillicothe Strait, small craft advisories, northeasterlies 25 knots, 7 foot seas. And for the area Castle Cape to Sitkinak, north 15, Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev. We've got southeast 15, and then the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, east at 20, Bristol Bay, northeast 20, seas 4 feet. And then for Tuesday, south winds 20 to 25 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Highest seas on the Pacific side at 11 feet, and the highest winds will be on the Bering Sea side there at 25 knots. Bristol Bay east at 15, and 30 knot winds out of the northwest now for the east side of Kodiak Island as Chillicothe Strait drops down to 15 knots. On Alaska Island tomorrow, southeast winds coming up to 30 knots, 9 to 10 foot seas. Gales for the Unmak Island area out toward Nikulski, southeast 40 to 45 knots. South to southeast 40 to 45 for Adak and Atka, and westerlies of 40 for Amchitka Island, west 30, 22-foot seas for Shimei and Attu, as well as Kiska. And then storm warnings coming into the picture there for the western Aleutians from Shimei to Kiska, southwest 50 knots, Amchitka Island south 40, and 35 to 40 knot gales for Adak and Atka out of the southwest, and small craft advisories Unmak Island for southwesterlies 25 to 30 knots, and west southwest at 20 for Unalaska Island. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, winds will be out of the east to 20 knots, 4-foot sea. Small craft advisories for the Yukon Delta coast, southeast 25. Small crafts also for St. Lawrence Island, south at 30, southeast 30 for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilofs, with seas for the Pribilofs 10 feet, but near 20 feet, St. Matthew Island. And for Tuesday, got southeast winds all along the southwest coast, Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island of small craft advisory level winds there, 30 knots or 25 to 30 knots, 25 knots along the Kuskokwim Delta coast, 20 knots in Norton Sound, and 20 knot southwest winds for the Pribilofs, 11-foot sea, southeast 30 for St. Matthew Island. Beaufort Sea, central and east side, brisk wind advisories since it's ice covered. Southwest 30 knots. Gales on the western Arctic coast, 35 knot winds. Cape Beaufort, Cape Thompson, southwest 40, and then back down to 30 from Cape Thompson to Wales. And for Tuesday, small craft advisories from Wales up to Cape Beaufort, south to southeast, 25 to 30 knots. Small craft advisories western Arctic coast. Brisk wind advisories on the far eastern coast out of the west at 25. For tonight, winter storm warning tonight, Noatak Valley and the western Arctic coast, and kicking in a little later there for the eastern Arctic coast, obviously. Looking at the chart here, snow and blowing snow, 4 to 6 inches there for the Noatak Valley, winds 30 miles an hour, 55-mile-an-hour winds with 1 to 3 inches there for the Arctic coast. High pressure holds over the central southern interior and slips a little farther to the east, but keeps a hold of central and southern Alaska. Weakening system brings gale force winds and rain into the eastern Aleutians. And the next day, big storm over the Queen Charlotte's, another one entering the western Bering Sea. High pressure in the interior. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.